Good afternoon. My name is Renee Stromberg. I'm from Tailless Systems. I was part of the original Tailless team, joined the company about 5 years ago. So this is the fourth year that we've been coming to the Layer 123 event. And my topic today is, 2 years ago we were acquired by Cisco, so my parent company is Cisco, in full disclosure. So I'm actually using the Cisco templating slide, but we're a daughter company. I want to talk to you about networking ecosystems in the era of SDN and NFV and what really matters. I think we've been, So we've been talking about the promise of software-defined networking for several years now. I think the first reason that we jumped on the SDN train was about 4 years ago when, as a startup, we noticed that Nicira got snapped up by VMware for $1.4 billion. And I think anybody who's a startup out there, that was very exciting for all of us, of like, wow, that's some real money. What is this SDN thing? And before I get into that, I wanted to give a little bit more background about where I'm coming from here. I'm actually a professional marketer with a background in liberal arts. So I love languages. I've learned several different languages. I did my senior thesis on cultural translation. So I learned Chinese, and I took a Chinese poem, and I took 3 different interpreters. And based on their cultural bias, there was a completely different version in English. So I want to tell you a lot of what you talk about of ecosystems has a lot to do with where you're coming from and what your cultural biases are. So here in the SDN world, about 4 years ago, there were 3 different terms of SDN. You had the OpenFlow SDN version, you had the Fabric version, and then you also had the network services version. Sort of when Axel talked about TerraStream, he was all about, I want to program network services. I don't really care about programming the networking plane. So from our perspective, we're like, yeah, we want to be all about programming network services. And if I can quote Craig Masamoto, he was at Light Reading at the time, he said, wow, all of a sudden network management became cool. It became SDN, and we're like, yay, exciting, very, very good thing that we can do there. So from that perspective, that's really where the industry has gone. And when we look at it, we're now 4 years on from this, and I'm personally a little frustrated that we're not all going in the same direction. So we're moving the conversation each time forward. But it would be great to get to the point where we all, as an ecosystem and community, can agree on what really is at the end of that rainbow. And so that's really what we want to talk to you about. But as I said, when ecosystems, in a perspective, there's a lot of different translations of an ecosystem, but in my mind, it's really an interaction of different living organisms. So everybody needs to know where they live in the organism and in the ecosystem and what their role and responsibilities are. So again, in this theme of cultural bias, I wanted to share this. So I'm an American who got pulled in to a very, very geeky company called Tailless, which was full of computer scientists and people with PhDs. And our CTO had a rule to me, Renee, you can't market anything unless we have running code. And as an American who's now living in Sweden, I was like, really? You know, in Silicon Valley, you get a PowerPoint, and then you go on a roadshow, and you show it around, and you try and get people to buy into your idea, and then you build it. So this was a new concept for me, but you know, if you're working for a company that's named after a Unix command, then you can have different rules. So in that mind frame, we started looking, if you look at the ecosystem, you have the marketing ecosystem. And in the marketing ecosystem, you have a lot of logos on a slide. You have people that say, yeah, I want to be part of the SDN and NFV community. Put my name on a logo. Put me on the newsletter. Let's go to events together. Let's have cocktail parties. We're in an ecosystem. That didn't fly with my CTO. Then you have business partnership ecosystems. And these are also equally important because as a salesperson, you may have a few different pieces of technology, and you want to take that technology and be able to sell it. Now, this is really good if you're a purchasing department. A purchasing department loves business ecosystems because then they only have one vendor to negotiate with, as opposed to, negotiating with 4 to 5 different vendors. So that's great from a purchasing perspective. But remember, we're in the operations track, so this isn't necessarily the ecosystem that I want to focus on. Then there's also the technically validated ecosystem. And this is also very important depending on what kind of service provider you are and what your level of risk is. This is great from an operations perspective if you take something in and it's completely end-to-end stack, vertically integrated. Somebody else has done the QA testing, the OSS, BSS, works down to the network. You've got everything going. You've got one throat to choke. So this is also good for certain people as well and certain operators, and I don't, it has its time and its place. But then there's the open standardized API ecosystem. And this is an ecosystem where the user and the customer builds the ecosystem. And if you look back at the definition about having different organisms that work in harmony together, you need to have some rules of engagement. And this is really where I'm going to focus my cultural bias from a Tailless Cisco perspective on the open standardized APIs. And I think this is really where we as an industry are stuck. And I would really like to move the conversation forward so that we can get beyond the API question. So what is a programmable API ecosystem? And this is extremely important as we talk about programming network services. So at the heart of my definition, or our definition that we managed to grab onto for SDN, which is about programming network services, it's all about finding the right layers of abstraction and programming the network. And so the abstraction layers, you need to be able to have an abstraction of the different devices and an abstraction of the different services. And so 2 different abstraction layers, and then you need to be able to have a programmable, well-defined, standardized API. Now remember, I am the lone marketing person in a sea of people with PhDs in computer science that require that everything has running code. And they have taught me, and I'm a good liberal arts student, so I've learned this well, that an API equals the protocol plus the data modeling language. So an API on its own has to have both components, or it doesn't equal the API. So that was new for me, and you'll hear a lot of people talking about different kind of data modeling languages, but then they need to have their own corresponding protocol, or else they're not an API. So this is something that at least going around the show floor and listening to conversations, this still seems like a basic, math rule that we as an industry haven't gotten to yet. So I wanted to break it down to the basics: API, protocol, data modeling language. And also we get a lot of questions about, okay, we have to build the network. And in the world of SDN and NFV, in a physical network, this is a truck roll. So you drive out, you install the gear, you get the fiber. It takes 6 months before they can. It's a truck roll. In a virtual world, in this community, we tend to call this day zero. Day zero conveyed. You have to get it up. It needs to be alive. It needs to say, I'm here. And in my mind, this is a virtual truck roll. You just need to get it up. So you can do it with Tosca. You can do it with heat templates. You can do it with probably Puppet and Chef and Ansible. You just need to get it up. It's day zero. So it's important, but it's not getting you to a programmable API. Now, programmable, this is where all of my ivory tower computer scientist guys are going to have taught me well. that the protocol that we recommend for the network, and now we're at the network abstraction layer, network down, I'm not talking about OSS, BSS, but to the network, and a single API north of the network really needs to be netconf. And netconf is very, it's a community API. And I say that a community API because it supports network-wide transactions. So I can say device 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can configure all of those, and if any of those things fail, if number 3 fails, I can roll back and I keep the network in a consistent state. So it's a very, very good ecosystem community API protocol. It's not the API, it's the protocol. And there's a lot of questions on, okay, what about RESTconf? Okay, well, RESTconf, in my simple marketing language, is a selfish API. So it's important, but it's RESTconf. It's, you can say, I want to talk to device number 3. It's all about me. I only participate for this particular command. That's great. You know, in certain cases, like, you know, at the SDN controller level, RESTconf is perfectly fine. As we get into other areas where you're looking at programming the alarm mods, you know, where you just need to be concerned about that certain thing, I think RESTconf is fine. But if you want to do network-wide transactions and be able to support ACID transactions, it needs to be RESTconf. Now, the data modeling language, I think this is where the industry has the most support. I think I've been doing lots of panels on the benefits of netconf and Yang. We've done 3 of them at Mobile World Congress where we get people on board. Yang is by far the modeling language of choice. It's very rich. There are IETF standards. There's MEF models. There's vendor models. It's growing. It's all about Yang. To the point where, you know, my nickname is the Yang Queen because I love to talk about Yang and the benefits of Yang. So I just wanted to clear this up and make sure that people understand API, the protocol, the modeling language. And from there, I think it's also really important to have a reality check. Because in this API ecosystem, what really matters is that we're on a journey. And I know that sounds really, really, you know, okay, we're on a journey. But, you know, we have to then start the journey and take a step. So the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I would say we're probably 100 yards into this race. Because we have been making progress, but we're not fully there yet. You know, we have brownfield deployments. We have tons of vendors that are not natively supporting netconf and Yang. There's tons of CLI, Cisco CLI, Juniper CLI. There's REST commands. Brownfield deployment, this is an operations session. So you guys probably know a lot more about brownfield complexity and the spaghetti than I do. And so that's really important that we have to start somewhere. We have to agree on where the destination is that we're going. And we need to do a reality check. And a lot of times people say, okay, Tailless, okay, Cisco, that's great that you're proposing netconf and Yang, but what really, you know, but then you can only talk to netconf and Yang devices, and there aren't that many netconf and Yang devices out there. This is where you get into the power of Yang. And today, in a brownfield deployment for the existing equipment that's out there, a lot of it from my parent company, Cisco, so thank you very much, we require adapters. We want to get rid of adapters going forward, but we need everybody's help in this process. But here's what we're doing in the meantime is we're really leveraging the power of Yang. We've got something we call a network element driver, which is a Yang system, and we do a protocol conversion. So we take the CLI commands, the REST commands, and we convert those into netconf. We do the same thing for the modeling language. Remember, an API has both the protocol and the modeling language, and we take those CLI strings or REST payloads, and we convert those into Yang. So now we have a system that can talk to anything, and we can abstract that brownfield deployment. So this is a very compelling thing for Cisco to have this kind of technology. But we want to be like NetConf. We want to be good corporate citizens and move the industry forward. I don't want to be talking about adapters in 5 years from now. I want the vendor community to move on. I want us to agree where is the destination and get everyone on board. So where are we on the next steps for this? Service providers, and I have to say, the highlight of this event in 2016 for me was when Verizon got on stage yesterday and did a big shout out to all the vendor community demanding NetConf and Yang. Said, I don't want to pay for adapters anymore. Don't come to me unless you have native NetConf and Yang. I was like, yes, finally. And then so you as service providers need to demand this of your vendors. And you can go to the Tailless website. We have a standard RFP that you can download that has, well, what do I need to ask for NetConf and Yang? Well, we can provide it for you. And you can send it back to my parent company, Cisco. You can send it to Juniper. You can send it to Ciena. Send it to everybody, because we have to move on. I don't want to have this conversation in 5 years. And service providers need to learn DevOps. You need to get your hands dirty with Yang models. You need to learn Python. From what I understand, Python's really cool. I think I'm going to take a class. You can stop by our Cisco booth. You can see a demo of how to use the power of Yang to model your brownfield deployments and to work on the next steps going forward. And network equipment providers, you know what? It's on us. It's on us as vendors to be able to do the right thing. And I can tell you that Cisco, my parent company that we got acquired 2 years ago, I didn't think this was possible, but we have launched on our new operating systems native support for NetConf and Yang. This is a big deal. I mean, this is a company that has been doing CLI for the last 20 years, and we are in the process of rolling this out. Are we 100% coverage? Not yet, but we're on a journey. We've got a lot of coverage. All new configuration is going to support NetConf and Yang. We're cleaning up the stuff as we go along. We're moving it into the networks, and we've turned the page on this. Proprietary interfaces is not what the industry needs. So we have standardized on an API, and it's NetConf and Yang. So as vendors, you need to participate in interoperability testing. And we also have made this easy for you. We at Tailless have taken our first and flagship product, ConfD, and we've made a free version of it. It's called ConfD Basic. You can go to the DevNet site at Cisco, download it for free. You can actually launch it into production for free, and you can stop by the Tailless booth and get systems integrators to tell you how to do this for your existing devices. So we need to move the conversation forward. And it is hard, but if you want to have the vision of software-defined networking and have a single API to a multi-vendor, multi-technology network, we have to, as an industry, agree on one single API. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renee.
I went over.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
I
We're
didn't.
actually doing excellent in time, and I would ask you for your questions now for Renee.
Thank you. It would be a little bit challenging question, because you are emphasizing the importance of Yang.
Yep.
I'm not saying that Yang is not important, but as I understand, Yang is just a language for describing the model, not the model itself. So you can have two VNF vendors which describe their VNFs with Yang, but still they may have different models.
Oh, absolutely. And this is
and
very important, and I wanted to touch on this because we're just getting to Yang is 70%, but at least we're talking, then we can do Yang to Yang conversions. But you're going to always have some vendor-specific Yang models. So if somebody has their VNF and Yang, there's still going to be a little bit room that you're going to have to do some maneuvering. So I know there's an industry demand for we need to have standardized device models for across the vendors, and that's a great aspirational goal as we get to the end. But if we can just agree on the API and the modeling language, we can come so much further together as an industry.
Okay, my point was that
my
point was that translation between the languages is not that difficult for machines. I think that semantics, which needs to be translated, is much more difficult. So that's what my point. That I think that emphasizing young might be introducing some misconception that if we have young, we are almost ready. I think
no. I mean, we're on a journey.
Okay.
I mean, but if we still as an industry have to agree on what is going to be the single API to the network, and right now we're still having, we can't agree on the destination, and if we standardize on something, and I don't see an alternative solution right now that has as much support as netconf and Yang does. So if we can stop having that conversation and we can start focusing on how to make the Yang models more interoperable, how do we standardize on them, what are the services, how do we expand the API to not just do configuration, but also to do alarm management and assurance, I think it makes our entire life easier as an industry to have that single API to the OSS and BSS layer.
I think what I was going to ask was a little bit similar. So you're talking about Python. So do the operators still need a scripting language to actually do the modeling?
No, so I mean, Python is more on once you have the network API and as you're starting to take the Yang models, then there's other ways to be able to upload those. And now I'm getting out of my comfort zone.
Oh, okay, because I was just saying, if I'm sitting on top and I'm trying to configure an enterprise APN or onboard an MVNO.
You are up in the cloud, and that's
so
a
how do you
different
model
set of
that?
tools.
Okay,
that's a different set of tools. And from my cultural perspective, I'm talking the network. And when you get up to the cloud perspective and the services perspective, it's a different set of tools that don't require the same API of netconf and Yang. So this is just to try and level the networking field in the operations area.